question. But if our free will, consciousness and vision are limited here, how can we be held fully responsible? Shouldn't our responsibility be limited as well? And the background for the question is that I have several videos where I talk about how Earth is a very dense planet. The energies that make up Earth are very dense. It's not just in the physical, but also in the emotional, mental, and identity levels. The energies are quite dense. So that limits our vision, that limits our sense of what we can do and can't do. But I've also talked about Earth is an educational institution in the sense that everything we do is done with energy, and this creates what traditionally is called karma, and therefore we are responsible for the choices we make. And so I understand the question, the questioner is saying, but we are exercising our free will, but we are doing it based on a limited vision, and therefore we can easily make mistakes, and therefore we shouldn't bear the full karma of the mistakes we make. And that's perfectly reasonable. But you see, so the person says, how can we be held fully responsible? But you see, we're not. We are not held fully responsible in the sense that we don't have as severe of a karma, we don't make as severe of a karma precisely because our vision is limited by Earth. You could say that if we had a full, completely clear vision, and we still chose to do something that harms others, we would make a much more severe karma than most people on Earth do. Now, there are some people that have a more severe karma because they have an understanding what they're doing. They are deliberately, maliciously harming other people. But most people on Earth, they are not malicious, and you're not deliberately trying to harm others. You're just maybe doing it by accident because you don't understand exactly what you're doing. And then your karma isn't as severe. You have the situation when Jesus is getting crucified and he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And it is an expression of this. When people's vision are limited, when they don't fully understand what they're doing, their karma isn't as severe as when they have a clear vision of it. So I understand the question, but I'm just saying it is actually all figured into the equation. The density of Earth, how difficult it is to see certain things, the fact that there are so many lies and illusions that are spread on what I call fallen beings, means that we don't make as severe of a karma. I explained this in my video about how the world was created, about fallen beings, how they have manipulated everything on Earth and how they created all these layers of deception. And you can just take an example from history, right? Adolf Hitler. He couldn't have done what he did if there weren't people who followed him and obeyed the orders. Clear. That's obvious. But here you have an ordinary person who grows up in Germany and gets drafted to the army and goes out and fights. And whatever he knows or doesn't know, it's obvious, to me at least, he doesn't make as severe of a karma as Hitler did, because Hitler started the whole thing. And Hitler had a higher vision than most normal people in the sense that he knew what he wanted to do, and he knew he had a clear intent, a clear agenda. So he orchestrated the whole thing with the Holocaust. And obviously he bore a much more severe karma than the persons who actually carried out the Holocaust, even though it is, of course, you're making karma by shoving people into gas chambers, but you didn't create the whole scenario. You didn't orchestrate it, you didn't plan it, you didn't think it out. So again, you can see here that there is always a certain equation between people's knowledge and intentions, so that if they don't have directly malevolent intentions and if they don't have full knowledge, their karma isn't as severe. Now it's important, of course, in connection with this that we don't use this as an excuse, because one of the things that you see in the world is that there are these leaders who commit these atrocious acts, and then they get people to follow them and support them in these acts. And the reason why they do this, it's actually a concept called karma dodging, where the fallen beings who orchestrate all these evil things in the world, by getting people to support them, the people are taking on some of the karma for it. So you could say, obviously the people who followed Hitler didn't make as severe karma as Hitler did, but they still made a certain karma for following him. And what that really means is that the question is, were they willing to see that what they had done was not the highest, that they shouldn't have followed Hitler? Or do they try to excuse what they did and defend it? So, in other words, you are held responsible for the choices you make, in the sense that your psychology is what determines your karma and your karmic return. I've said this before, that the reason why karma is delayed, in other words, you commit a certain act and it takes time, possibly in a future lifetime, before the karma comes back to you. And the reason for this is that in the meantime, you have the opportunity to change your consciousness. And if you have changed your consciousness, the karma won't become physical. So the question is, but if people don't change their consciousness, then the karma will become physical. It will return all the way to the physical. And so you see, for example, you see in Germany, you see that after the war and after the Holocaust became known, there was definitely a process of self-observation, self-evaluation for the German nation. And many Germans have been willing to go through a process of realizing this was wrong and asking themselves how they could possibly have been pulled into supporting this. And therefore, they don't have as severe of a karma for it as they would have if they had just denied the whole thing or glossed it over. On the other hand, you can see in Russia, where the Russian population, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they didn't go through a process of saying, how could we have be pulled into supporting such a totalitarian regime? And that's why now they basically have recreated the kind of society that they had during Soviet times, because they have the same repressions. And now they're engaged in the war in Ukraine. And some Russians, of course, can see that this is not good, but many don't. They either support blindly the leaders, as they did during communism, or they don't want to think about it. They don't want to even talk about it. They don't want to have an opinion about it. So that shows you that many Russians haven't gone through a growth in consciousness, which now means that they will have the ordinary Russian, even if they're not fighting in Ukraine, they will have a much more severe karma for this than if they had been willing to transcend the consciousness. And you can see the same in many other situations around the world.